Have you ever thought about how a single moment in history can change absolutely everything?
Oh, yeah,
It's
definitely.
like a pivot point where everything shifts.
Yeah.
Well, today we're looking at one of those moments,
Mm.
a scene that's absolutely overflowing with accusations,
Oh, wow.
the downfall of a king,
Okay.
and even the very first whispers of rebellion.
I like it.
So we're going deep into Act 4, Scene 1 of Shakespeare's Richard II.
Ah, Richard II.
But this isn't just about, like, reading some old dusty play. It's like we're getting a front row seat
Oh, yeah.
to this really messy and really personal collapse of power.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating is that Shakespeare manages to capture this huge, monumental shift in just one scene.
Yeah.
Like in a single chamber.
It's incredible.
It is, and it really draws you in because you're not just reading these words on a page.
Right.
You're really witnessing that raw human drama unfold.
Yeah.
The messy emotions, the power struggles, it's all there.
So today we're going to really break down this pivotal scene for you. We're going to try to pull out all the crucial elements
Right.
that really show how dramatic this power transfer was.
Yes.
And all those simmering tensions that are just bubbling under the surface.
Absolutely. And I think
theory.
if we can understand this one scene,
Yeah.
we can really unlock this whole period of history
Yes.
and understand why things unfolded the way they did.
Exactly. So it's like a backstage pass
Exactly.
to this complex historical moment.
Yes.
But we're going to do it without overwhelming you
Right.
with every single detail.
We'll keep it clear and focused.
Exactly.
And I think this scene is particularly important because it really is the engine that drives the whole play forward.
Okay.
So much happens in this one scene
Yeah.
that sets the stage for everything that follows.
So to kind of lay out what we're going to be focusing on, we're going to see all these accusations flying around in Parliament.
Yes, lots of drama there.
Yeah. And this fundamental questioning of the king's divine, right? We're going to see Richard being forced to abdicate.
Right.
And then we're going to hear those first hushed conversations.
Yes, those whispers.
That hint at what's going to happen next.
Oh, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, so the scene opens in Westminster Hall,
Okay.
which wasn't just any old room.
No, not at all.
This was like the heart of royal power and justice.
Yeah, the most important room in the kingdom, really.
Exactly. And Bolingbroke chooses to convene this gathering there, which feels like a really deliberate move.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What do you think he's trying to achieve?
I think he's trying to send a very clear message
Right.
by holding this gathering in Westminster Hall.
Yeah.
He's basically saying this is where the real authority lies now.
Okay.
He's positioning himself within that traditional seat of English power
Right.
and making it clear that he's the one in charge.
Okay, and what's the first order of business?
Well, Bolingbroke wants to address the death of the Duke of Gloucester.
Okay, so this is Richard's uncle.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And there have been a lot of rumors and suspicions surrounding his death. So Bolingbroke immediately calls on Bagot.
Who's Bagot?
Bagot used to be in Richard's inner circle.
Okay.
So he's someone who might have inside knowledge
Right.
about what really happened to Gloucester.
Okay, so Bolingbroke is calling on him to kind of spill the beans.
Exactly. He wants to know who was involved in Gloucester's death.
Right.
And he wants Bagot to name names.
And this isn't just about, like, getting to the bottom of a murder.
No, there's a lot more at stake here.
Right.
This is a way for Bolingbroke to chip away at Richard's legitimacy,
Okay.
to make him look weak and incompetent.
And to show that maybe he was involved in something shady?
Exactly.
So what does Bagot say when he's put on the spot?
Well, he doesn't hold back.
Oh, okay.
He directly accuses the Duke of Aumerle
Oh, wow.
of being one of the key players in plotting Gloucester's death.
Okay, so Aumerle is Richard's cousin.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And Bagot claims that Aumerle even bragged about his influence reaching all the way to Calais, where Gloucester was killed.
Right.
And he also says that Aumerle desperately wanted Bolingbroke dead,
Oh, wow.
believing that it would somehow be good for the country.
That's a huge accusation.
It is.
So it seems like this is a very calculated move
Yeah.
on Bolingbroke's part to kind of put Aumerle on the defensive.
Absolutely.
And what's Aumerle's reaction to all of this?
Well, he is not happy.
I can imagine.
He calls Bagot a base man.
Which is a pretty serious insult in those days.
It basically implies that he's beneath contempt,
Right.
not even worthy of respect.
Yeah.
But then Aumerle does something really dramatic.
Okay.
He throws down his gage.
His gage, what's that?
It's his glove.
Okay.
And in this context, it's a challenge to a duel.
Oh, wow.
He's basically saying, I'm willing to fight to the death.
Yeah.
To prove that you're a liar.
So it's a challenge to Bagot.
Wow.
And he even questions whether he should dishonor his fair stars.
What does he mean by that?
He's basically saying, am I really going to lower myself to the level of this base man?
Right.
By even responding to his accusations.
Wow, so the stakes are really high here.
They are. And this act of throwing down the gage is incredibly significant.
Why is that?
It shows us how important honor was to these aristocratic men.
Mm-hmm.
They were willing to risk their lives to defend their reputation.
It's amazing how these verbal accusations so quickly escalate to this threat of mortal combat.
Yeah, it gives you a real sense of the atmosphere of the time and how easily things could spiral out of control.
It's almost like they're living by a different set of rules.
They are. It's a very different world.
Okay, so Aumerle throws down his glove. What happens next?
Well, it sets off a chain reaction.
Oh, wow.
Lord Fitzwater jumps in, supporting Bagot, and claiming that he also heard Aumerle bragging about causing Gloucester's death.
So he's corroborating Bagot's story.
Exactly.
Okay.
And of course, Fitzwater throws down his gage as well.
Oh, so he's challenging Aumerle to a duel, too.
Yes.
Wow, this is getting intense.
It is. And then Henry Percy.
Oh, Henry Percy.
Also known as Hotspur.
Hotspur.
He throws down his gage, too.
Oh, wow. So he's also accusing Aumerle?
Yes. He calls Aumerle a liar.
Right.
And says he's willing to fight him to prove his injustice.
Wow, so that's 3 gauges down already.
It is.
What is going on?
It's like a cascade of challenges.
It seems like it's turning into a free-for-all.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that it's no longer just about Gloucester's death.
Right.
It's become this public display of the fracturing of authority.
Okay.
And this descent into a more primal form of conflict resolution.
So it's like they're reverting back to this more basic instinct.
Yeah, it's like the veneer of civilization has been stripped away.
And everyone's just ready to fight.
It really shows you how unstable things were at the time and how personal grievances could quickly become these huge public and political issues.
Okay, so it's 3 against 1 at this point. Does anyone come to Aumerle's defense?
He does find one defender in the Duke of Surrey.
Okay.
Who remembers the conversation that Fitzwater mentioned. But he remembers it differently.
Right.
He takes Aumerle's side and calls Fitzwater a liar.
Oh, wow. So he's contradicting Fitzwater's account.
Yes, and of course he throws down his gage as well.
Another gauge.
It's a duel fest.
It is. So it's like this brief moment of loyalty in this scene that's mostly about everyone just trying to save themselves.
Yeah, it's a flicker of that traditional loyalty.
Right.
In a world that's suddenly become very self-serving.
So Surrey's defending Aumerle, but Fitzwater is not backing down.
No, he's not.
What does he say?
He reiterates his accusation.
Okay.
And then he adds a very interesting detail.
Okay.
He claims that the banished Duke of Norfolk.
Oh, Norfolk.
Yes.
So this is the guy that Bolingbroke banished at the beginning of the play.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Fitzwater claims that Norfolk told him that Aumerle was the one who sent men to Calais to murder Gloucester.
Oh, wow. So now he's bringing in Norfolk, who can't even defend himself because he's been banished.
Exactly.
This is getting complicated.
It is. And of course, Aumerle challenges Norfolk as well.
Throws down his gage.
Yes. Another one bites the dust.
That's like everyone's itching for a fight.
They are. And Bolingbroke sees an opportunity here.
Okay.
He agrees to repeal Norfolk's banishment.
Oh, wow.
And restore his lands.
Okay.
So that he can come back and face Aumerle in this trial by combat.
So he's trying to appear fair and just...
Exactly. He wants to be seen as someone who's willing to give everyone a fair hearing.
Right.
And who's not afraid to go against his own previous decisions.
So he's playing the long game here.
He is. He's very strategic.
But it seems like fate has other plans.
It does.
Because the Bishop of Carlisle steps forward with some rather inconvenient news.
Yes. This is the same bishop who we saw earlier.
Right.
He announces that the Duke of Norfolk is dead.
Oh, why?
He died in Italy, fighting against pagans.
So no trial by combat then?
No.
So all those accusations against Aumerle are just kind of left hanging?
They are.
Which must be incredibly frustrating for him.
I imagine so.
But all of this is about to be overshadowed by some even bigger news.
Oh, yes.
Because the Duke of York arrives.
Okay.
With some truly shocking news.
Okay, tell me everything.
He announces that King Richard has decided to step down.
Oh, wow.
And he's named Bolingbroke as his heir.
So Richard has just given up his crown.
It seems that way.
Wow.
York says that Richard is doing this with willing soul, and he's handing over his scepter and his throne to Bolingbroke.
That's incredible.
And he urges Bolingbroke to accept and become King Henry IV.
So this is a huge moment.
This is a seismic shift in power.
Absolutely.
And what does Bolingbroke say?
Well, he doesn't hesitate.
Okay.
He accepts and says that he will ascend in God's name.
Okay, so he's invoking God's authority here.
Yes. He's trying to legitimize his claim to make it seem like this is all part of God's plan.
So he's not just taking the throne by force.
No, he's trying to frame it as something that's divinely ordained.
But not everyone is happy about this.
No.
The Bishop of Carlisle, who just told everyone about Norfolk's death, right?
He steps forward and he is not pleased.
Okay.
He delivers this really passionate speech.
Oh, wow.
Arguing that no subject has the right to judge their king.
Okay.
He says that the king is divinely appointed.
Okay.
He calls him the figure of God's majesty.
Wow.
His captain, his steward, his deputy-elect,
Opa.
anointed, crowned, planted many years.
So he's really laying it on thick with the divine right of kings argument.
He's basically saying that the king's authority comes directly from God.
Okay.
And that he's answerable only to God.
Not to his subjects.
Exactly.
To challenge the king is to challenge God himself.
Exactly.
And what was the reaction to this argument at the time?
Well, the divine right of kings was a really powerful idea. It had been around for centuries.
Right.
And people really believed it.
Okay.
So the bishop's speech would have resonated with a lot of people.
So he's speaking for a lot of people in the room.
Yeah, he's voicing a very traditional view of power.
Right.
And he's directly challenging the legitimacy of what Bolingbroke is doing.
Wow.
But he doesn't stop there.
What else does he say?
He predicts all sorts of terrible things for England.
Like what?
He says that there will be bloodshed, disorder, and endless war.
Oh, wow.
He says that the blood of English shall manure the ground.
That's a very vivid image.
It is. It's a very powerful prophecy.
And does it come true?
Well, you could argue that it does.
Mm-hmm.
England does experience a lot of turmoil in the years following Richard's deposition, including the Wars of the Roses.
Right.
So the bishop's words seem quite prophetic in hindsight.
So he's warning them about the consequences of disrupting the established order.
Exactly. He's saying that this is going to have serious repercussions.
But Northumberland is not having any of it.
No, he's not.
What does he do?
He arrests the bishop.
Oh, well.
For capital treason.
Capital treason? What does that mean?
That's the most serious crime imaginable.
Oh, okay.
It's punishable by death.
Wow.
And accusing a bishop of this crime was a very big deal.
Why is that?
Because the church held immense power and influence at the time.
Right.
So to arrest a high-ranking clergyman for simply speaking his mind was a very bold move.
So it's a show of force.
It's a way for Bolingbroke and his supporters to silence any opposition and to consolidate their power.
So it's a very clear message to anyone who might be thinking of challenging them.
Exactly. Don't even try it.
But Bolingbroke seems to realize that he needs to be careful here because he requests that Richard be brought in personally for public surrender.
So he wants Richard to abdicate in front of everyone.
Exactly.
Why do you think that is?
I think he wants to make it absolutely clear that Richard is giving up the throne willingly.
Right.
Even though we can probably guess that's not entirely true.
Probably not.
But it's all about appearances.
It is. It's about creating the illusion of legitimacy.
Right.
So that no one can accuse Bolingbroke of taking the throne by force.
Exactly.
And this public spectacle is also a way for Bolingbroke to humiliate Richard.
Okay.
To really rub his nose in his defeat.
Right.
And to show everyone who's really in charge now.
Okay, so Richard is brought in. What's his reaction?
Well, he seems disoriented at first.
Okay.
Almost like he can't believe this is actually happening to him.
Yeah.
He says that he's barely had time to adjust to not being king anymore.
Right.
And he talks about the fickle loyalty of men, even comparing them to Judas betraying Christ.
Oh, wow.
He feels deeply betrayed and abandoned.
That's a really powerful comparison.
It is. It shows just how hurt and angry Richard is.
Right.
He's not just lost his crown. He's lost his faith in humanity.
So it's a very personal betrayal for him.
It is. It's not just about politics.
Okay, so Richard is clearly heartbroken, but he's still expected to formally resign his crown.
Right.
And this is where he delivers that famous metaphor.
Oh, yes, the metaphor of the well.
Exactly.
Tell me about it.
So Richard compares the crown to a deep well with two buckets. One bucket is going up.
Right.
And that represents Bolingbroke's rise to power.
Okay.
And the other bucket is going down, full of tears.
Oh, wow.
And that represents Richard's own downfall.
So it's like one is rising at the expense of the other.
Exactly.
It's a very powerful image.
And it really captures that sense of loss and despair.
It does. It's like Richard is watching his own world crumble around him.
And he knows that there's nothing he can do to stop it.
He's powerless.
But then he says this incredibly poignant line. He says, "My crown I am, but still my griefs are mine. You may my glories and my state depose, but not my griefs."
Wow. That's a really powerful statement.
It is. What do you think he means by that?
I think he's saying that even though he's lost everything external,
right,
his crown, his status, his followers, he still has his inner world.
His emotions.
Yes, his grief, his pain.
So it's like he's clinging to that as the one thing that they can't take away from him.
Exactly. It's his last shred of dignity.
Right.
His last assertion of selfhood.
Okay, so Richard formally hands over the crown and the scepter, but the humiliation is not over.
No.
Because Northumberland presents him with this long list of accusations and crimes against the state.
It's like a laundry list of all his supposed failings.
Exactly, and they demand that he confess to all of them.
Oh, wow.
To justify his deposition.
So they want him to publicly admit that he was a bad king.
Yeah, it's really cruel.
It is. It's like they're trying to erase any positive memory of his reign.
But Richard refuses to play along.
He
questions the hypocrisy of it all, asking if Northumberland would be so keen to read out his own offenses.
Right.
And he calls out the heinous article containing the deposing of a king and cracking the strong warrant of an oath.
So he's basically saying that this whole process is illegitimate.
Right.
And that it sets a dangerous precedent.
So by refusing to confess, he's making a very powerful statement.
He's refusing to validate their actions.
Right.
And he's standing up for the principle of kingship.
Okay, so Richard's been stripped of his title. He's been forced to give up his crown.
Right.
He's been publicly humiliated.
Yes.
What happens next?
Well, in another really memorable moment, Richard asks for a mirror.
A mirror, why?
He wants to see his face.
Okay.
Now that he's bankrupt of his majesty.
And he wants to see how his loss of power has changed him.
Yes. I think he's looking for a reflection of his diminished self.
Okay.
A visual confirmation of his fall.
And what happens when he sees his reflection?
Well, he smashes the mirror to the ground.
Oh, wow.
It shatters into 100 pieces.
That's a very dramatic gesture.
It is, and it's a very symbolic one.
What do you think it symbolizes?
I think it represents the shattering of Richard's identity.
Okay.
The breaking of his self-image as king.
Right.
It's like his whole world has been shattered.
And he's just expressing that outward.
Exactly.
So after this dramatic moment, Richard asks for leave to depart.
Right.
Does Bolingbroke let him go?
He does, but with a catch.
What's the catch?
He orders Richard to be taken to the Tower of London.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So the Tower of London at this time wasn't exactly a pleasant place to be?
No, it was basically a prison.
Right.
Often used to house political prisoners.
So it's a very ominous sign for Richard's future.
It is. It suggests that he's going to be kept under close guard.
Right.
And that he might never be free again.
And what are Richard's final words in the scene?
He says, "Oh good, conveyors are you all, that rise thus nimbly by a true king's fall." So he's basically saying that everyone around him is an opportunist who's just using him to advance their own careers.
Right.
He sees them as vultures circling his dying carcass.
That's a very harsh judgment.
It is, but it shows how deeply betrayed Richard feels.
Okay, so Richard is led away to the tower. What happens next?
Well, Bolingbroke announces his coronation,
which
is going to take place the following Wednesday.
So he's not wasting any time.
No, he's moving quickly to consolidate his power.
And then we see a very interesting little scene with the Bishop of Carlisle, Abbot of Westminster, and Aumerle.
They're the ones who are left behind.
Yes.
And they are not happy.
Okay.
They're whispering among themselves.
Right.
Clearly unhappy with everything that's just happened.
So it's like the calm before the storm.
Exactly.
What are they talking about?
Well, Aumerle gets right to the point.
Okay.
He asks if there's a plot to get rid of this pernicious blot.
Meaning Bolingbroke.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So they're already plotting against him.
It seems that way.
And what does the abbot say?
Well, he proposes a plan.
Okay.
He suggests that Aumerle take a sacrament as a pledge of secrecy and commitment to whatever they're going to do.
Okay.
And they agree to meet at the abbot's home.
So the wheels of conspiracy are already in motion.
They are. And it's interesting that these three figures are the ones who are plotting.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think they each have their own reasons.
Okay.
The bishop is obviously ideologically opposed to Bolingbroke.
Right.
He believes in the divine right of kings, and he sees Bolingbroke as a usurper.
Okay.
The abbot is a powerful figure in the church.
Right.
And he probably fears the implications of this challenge to traditional authority.
Okay.
And Aumerle is a disgruntled former royal favorite.
Right.
Who's lost his position and his influence.
So they all have their own grievances.
They do, and that makes them natural allies in this potential rebellion.
So this scene ends with a sense of foreboding,
Yeah.
like something big is about to happen.
It does.
So we've seen a lot in this scene.
We have.
What are some of the key takeaways for you, the learner?
Well, I think this scene really shows us how quickly things can change in the world of politics.
Right.
1 minute you're on top.
Right.
And
the next minute you're being led away to prison.
Exactly. And it also shows us the clash between these old ideas about power.
Like the divine right of kings.
Yes.
And the new realities of political ambition.
Absolutely.
And we've seen the very personal and very tragic downfall of a ruler and the immediate emergence of resistance to the new regime.
Yeah. And what really stood out to me was Richard's smashing of the mirror.
Yeah, that was a really powerful moment.
It was like a physical manifestation of his broken identity.
Yeah, and I think the bishop's prophecy is also really significant because it foreshadows all the turmoil that's going to come. So even though this happened centuries ago, it still feels incredibly relevant today.
It does.
Because these themes of power and legitimacy and the consequences of political upheaval are still so relevant.
Yeah. Human nature doesn't really change.
It doesn't.
So this scene really leaves us with a lot to think about, doesn't it?
It does.
What does it tell us about the true nature of power? Is it something that's inherent, or is it something that can be taken away?
That's a great question.
And what were the long-term consequences of this day in Westminster Hall?
Yeah, how did this deposition shape the future of England?
So much to ponder.
Definitely.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into Richard II.
But I hope it's given you plenty to think about.
If you want to learn more about this fascinating period,
Be sure to check out the resources in the show notes.
thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.